are joined by Calvin Barry, a criminal lawyer who has been keeping an eye on the case and joins us now. Were you surprised, Calvin?
No, I think it was pretty predictable. The onus on the Crown, proof beyond a reasonable doubt, is a very high standard. And so the jury listened to all the evidence, and then they went into the jury room and they came out with a not guilty verdict.
There was a lot of gray zone in this, right?
Yes, you never know what's going to happen. I thought the prosecutor had the judge charge a jury with an option of manslaughter because they were worried.
Right,
they were worried
that
they wanted a saw-off, so to speak, and they knew they wouldn't get the higher one, but that didn't succeed either.
Now, when people were watching this, was there ever a point where you thought, okay, it would go the other way?
No, I thought that it was going to be an acquittal. Again, proof beyond a reasonable doubt. It's one thing to charge somebody, that's reasonable probable grounds, very low standard, but to convict somebody unanimously would have to be 6-0 to acquit, and that's what they did. It's even more difficult in Ontario and Canada because there's 12 jurors, and it has to be unanimous, and if it was 11-1 to acquit, that'd be a hung jury.
So I was going to say that. The next question for me was, how would you compare this case? If this was in Canada, how would it be different?
Not that much. To be 12 jurors, and the jury, I've done many jury trials, both as a prosecutor and defense, murder, and they're usually out quite a while. The fact they were out that long shows that they had a reasoned verdict. They looked at the exhibits, they considered the charge from the judge and what to do, and they decided. I mean, one can say there's protests and stuff, but it's a great process. There's a due process. There's a constitution. There's a lot of evidence. Rules have to be followed, and the jury came out with what the right verdict was, and it was not guilty.
Was there enough evidence for the prosecution side? What was their sort of weakness there?
Well, I think it's always problematic in self-defense, and dead people tell no tales. So, he had to speak from the grave to the 911 calls and the circumstantial evidence and witnesses that, heard things. And so at the end of the day, murder on a certain level is always more difficult for the prosecution because the deceased isn't there to testify, so to speak. I mean, it sounds funny, but that's the reality of it.
And what about the Florida laws? Do you think anything could change because of it? Do you think anything needs to be improved?
No, I mean, the prosecution could technically appeal, and they have 30 days to do that if they felt that the judge didn't charge the jury properly on applicable law and the evidence that in the finding of fact that the judge put forward to the jury. So they could appeal, they may appeal. I don't think they will. But excessive force and self-defense, it's very complicated and it's very difficult for the prosecutor. And I lost many murder trials where self-defense was asserted because it's a difficult challenge for the prosecutor to bring the conviction home.
What about using a gun? Would that be different here than there?
Oh, totally. The gun laws are completely different in the States, and as you know, you have a constitutional right to bear arms you don't have in Canada, and if you had a concealed weapon in Canada, that's a big offense in and of itself, and you go to jail for many months for that alone. Carry a concealed weapon, but down in the States, they have their notions of guns and firearms, and I think that's why there's more murders per capita, way more than in Canada.
Do you think more lawsuits are going to show up now against George Zimmerman? Civil lawsuits?
You can always remember O.J. Simpson. He got acquitted, but he was found civilly liable for the wrongful death of the two people, and he ended up being sued and judgment entered for like $35 million. So, I mean, the difference between O.J. Simpson and this gentleman, obviously, is he doesn't have the money that O.J. Simpson did. And I think O.J. Simpson filed for bankruptcy. And but the fact that you are acquitted doesn't mean anything because the civil standard is a balance of probability. It's like 51-49. Where proof beyond reasonable doubt, one might argue that's 90% certainty of conviction.
Okay, Calvin, thanks so much for joining us.
You're welcome.